Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight I continue my incredibly dull history series, and tonight I tell you about the incredibly dull history of glasses and sunglasses, and people being able to see through them, or not, as the case may be. And perhaps this history might give you an appreciation for being able to see through your glasses, or just through your eyes. I hope it's not too dull, but dull enough that you fall asleep very soon. If you'd like to support my work, you can do so on Patreon. The link is below this video. Okay, let's do the relaxation session now, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever surface you lie on tonight. And beneath all of that, feel the support of the earth. That deep, grounding support, that constant support, that unchanging, reassuring support that comes from our home, the earth. And as you become aware of it, see if you can release a little more. Let go a little more. 9. Feel into your body now. Where are you still holding? Where do you feel tension? Perhaps you feel pain. Maybe it's in your toes or your feet. Maybe it's in your lower legs. Maybe your thighs. Or your belly. Maybe you're holding in your chest. Or maybe you're like me and you hold too much tension in your hands or your face. And as you lie here now, and as you become aware of this tension or holding on, notice the release that comes with awareness. Just let go now. 8. You are safe. Allow my voice to be a friend tonight, to be a gentle guide. Know that my voice will only ever take you to safe places. See if you can find the peace in that fact. See if you can find the trust. See if you can notice that when we feel safe, we can become curious, and we can feel a little light of joy within our hearts as we move closer and closer to sleep. 7. The day is done. Whatever has been, and whatever will be, will be. Whatever thoughts arrive with you tonight, just notice them for what they are. Thoughts, the part of being human, but not you. You are not your thoughts. You don't have to follow them. They don't have to lead your emotions. And so if and when they come, and they will, let them float away now, like leaves on a moonlit river, or clouds passing by through a starlit sky. 6. This is your moment. This is your time. Allow that fact to enable you to settle in now, to feel cozy now, to feel the warmth and joy of the ability to just lie here and hear a cozy story. 5. Peace lives within you. It is always there. It is just waiting to be found, waiting to be felt. And so see if you can find that peace within you tonight. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things. The shelter you have tonight. The breath in your body. 3. Begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see the humble beginnings of eyewear a long, long time ago, in a place far away from all that you know. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1. Completely letting go now. as I tell you tonight's sleep story. Part 1, in which we begin with squinting. Before there were spectacles, there was squinting. Humanity's first and, for several millennia, only response to poor vision was to narrow the eyes until the world looked very slightly less fuzzy. It worked, after a fashion, though at the cost of looking either deeply suspicious or permanently confused. Entire generations went through life assuming that was simply how sight worked. You could see well enough when the sun was behind a cloud, and not at all when it wasn't. For those who couldn't get by on squinting alone, there were other options. Moving closer to the thing you wanted to see, not always convenient if it was, for example, the moon. Enlarging the thing. This worked with writing, but less so with livestock. Or pretending you had no need to see it in the first place. Ancient poets rarely waxed lyrical about the sharpness of the horizon, because, frankly, most of them couldn't see it. One imagines there were early experiments with holding objects in front of the eyes, pieces of crystal, polished stones, the occasional shard of glass that hadn't yet been trodden into the earth. All were tried by the more curious, or perhaps the more desperate. Whether these helped, or simply distorted things into a new and equally unhelpful blur, is lost to history. We do know that in China, around the 12th century, judges used flat planes of smoky quartz, not to improve vision, but to hide any hint of emotion during court proceedings. This, while a blow for transparency in the legal system, was a small but important step toward eyewear, the first recorded instance of people putting something in front of their eyes on purpose. Part 2, in which fire comes into it. Somewhere along the line, someone noticed that certain lumps of glass or crystal didn't just sit there. They could do things. For example, they could set fire to ants. Not on purpose at first, but still. A clear, curved object, if held just right, could focus sunlight into a small, burning point. This was both alarming and entertaining, and the entertainment value alone was enough to make burning glasses a thing in the ancient world. The Greeks and Romans soon found a more dignified use, magnifying small objects. Seneca, the Roman philosopher and part-time spectacle enthusiast, in spirit if not in hardware, once remarked that letters could be made larger by viewing them through a glass globe of water. This was not widely adopted, possibly because it required one to keep a bowl of water on one's desk and lean over it like a heron inspecting a pond. Still, the principle was there. The reading stone, a polished hemisphere of glass, laid directly on the page, appeared in Europe around the year 1000. Monks, whose eyesight was already tested by low light and long hours over manuscripts, must have felt this was something close to sorcery. The drawback was that reading stones were about as portable as a half brick and roughly as fashionable. But for a while, they were the cutting edge, quite literally in some cases, as the edges could chip and cut a particularly careless friar's thumb. Part 3, in which two lenses become better than one. The leap from a single lens you have to hold to two lenses you can balance precariously on your face took place in late 13th century Italy, almost certainly in Pisa. One Dominican friar, Giordano da Pisa, gave a sermon in 1306 in which he claimed to have spoken to the man who invented them. Sadly, he neglected to write down the man's name, which has annoyed historians ever since. These first spectacles were known as rivet spectacles because the two lenses were joined in the middle by a rivet, allowing them to fold inwards like a nervous beetle. They had no arms, so the wearer had to keep their head fairly still. A sudden sneeze could send them clattering to the floor, and if you were unlucky enough to be reading near a drain, that was the end of your investment. Venetian glassmakers soon became the leaders in lens production, not least because they already had the skills to make clear, relatively bubble-free glass. They also had a healthy network of traders to spread the idea across Europe. By the mid-14th century, spectacles were turning up in portraits of scholars, clergymen, and anyone else who wanted to be seen as a person of letters. They were not yet a fashion statement, so much as a declaration that you could read, which in that era was the medieval equivalent of casually mentioning your third holiday home. Part 4, in which people attempt to improve upon the nose perch. For the first century or so, spectacles remained essentially the same. Two small lenses joined in the middle, perching on the nose like an indecisive bird. This was fine for brief periods of reading, but not ideal for anything more ambitious, such as walking, gesturing enthusiastically, or having a face. The absence of arms meant that a vigorous nod of agreement could launch one's spectacles forward into a neighbor's soup. The obvious solution, attaching some kind of strap or ribbon, was indeed tried. Early depictions show spectacles with cords that could be tied behind the head, giving the wearer the faint look of a medieval hostage. This worked tolerably well for monks, whose heads were already encircled by hoods, but it was less practical for anyone with ambitions to appear in public without resembling a parcel. Some frames had loops on the ends, so the spectacles could be suspended from a hat brim, or even sewn into a hood. This allowed for hands-free operation, but did nothing for one's dignity. There were also social factors to consider. Spectacles had quickly become associated with age, a visible admission that one's eyes were not what they used to be. In a world where lifespans were shorter and physical vigor was prized, a pair of glasses could be as much a statement about your stage in life as a walking stick. There's a charmingly stubborn letter from the poet Petrarch, written in his later years, in which he acknowledges the usefulness of lenses, while sounding personally offended that he needs them at all. One imagines him grumbling about it at length, holding the spectacles at arm's length, as if they'd insulted him personally, still. Vanity aside, their spread continued. By the 15th century, traveling peddlers sold cheap pears in towns and fairs, alongside cooking pots, fabric, and improbable miracle cures. A mason could pick up a pear for a day's wages, not a small sum, but within reach, and then promptly leave them on a church wall somewhere, and have to buy another set the following year. And so, the spectacle trade flourished, aided by forgetfulness and mild carelessness. Part 5, in which arms appear, and with them freedom. The next great leap came in the 18th century, and for once, it wasn't about the lenses at all. It was about the bits that held them in place. Up to this point, most spectacles still relied on nose grip, head straps, or simply the wearer's ability to remain eerily motionless. Enter the spectacle arm, two little lengths of metal or wood extending from the frame, curving over the ears to hold everything steady. The idea is often credited to an Englishman named Edward Scarlett around 1727, though it's possible others had tried something similar earlier. Scarlett's version was simple but effective. The spectacles stayed put, even during mild exertion, and could be removed in one fluid, dignified motion, instead of being peeled off like a stubborn bandage. For those with wigs, which was most fashionable men of the era, the arms could be made long and straight to tuck securely into the hairpiece. This had the added advantage of making removal nearly impossible, without removing the wig too. So some people simply wore them all day, out of self-preservation. Of course, innovation breeds variation. There were double-hinged arms for extra folding, spring-loaded nose grips for a firmer hold, and even early tinted lenses for the sensitive-eyed, although these were more often prescribed for medical conditions, than for blocking sunlight. Some enterprising makers experimented with green or blue glass, which was believed to soothe the eyes. Whether it did so, or simply made the world look like it had been painted by an eccentric artist, is unclear. It was around this time that Benjamin Franklin, finding himself both far-sighted and near-sighted, invented the bifocal lens. The story goes that he was tired of switching between two pairs of spectacles, so he cut the lenses in half and combined them. In Franklin's mind, this was efficient. In the minds of his contemporaries, it looked a bit like he'd had an accident with a glass cutter and decided to roll with it. Nonetheless, the bifocal caught on, and people have been craning their necks up and down through them ever since. By the end of the 18th century, the over-ear spectacle was well established. Gone were the days when reading in a drafty room meant keeping one hand clamped to your nosepiece for fear of losing it to a gust of wind. With arms came freedom, and with freedom came the ability to forget you were wearing spectacles at all, until you realized you'd been looking for them for half an hour while they sat quietly on your face. Part 6. The late 18th century. Glasses go public. By the latter part of the 1700s, spectacles had moved from being private study tools to something that might actually be worn in public. The addition of arms had helped, of course, but so had a gradual softening of attitudes. A gentleman might still avoid wearing them while delivering a speech, but he might put them on to sign an important document, or to read the small print in a treaty. In 1783, George Washington did just that. Only his document wasn't a treaty, but the morale of his officers at the close of the American Revolutionary War. Taking out his spectacles, which few had seen him wear before, he remarked, "Gentlemen, you must pardon me. I have not only grown grey, but almost blind in the service of my country. It was a disarming moment. The glasses were not a sign of weakness, but of long service, and perhaps a subtle reminder that the eyes, like the rest of the body, bore the cost of leadership. Still, outside moments of gravitas, people remained wary. In polite society, you might see someone whip out a small single lens on a stick, a quizzing glass, to inspect an object or a person, rather than wearing spectacles full time. It was the difference between using a fork and bringing the entire cutlery drawer to the table. These single lens devices were as much about display as they were about function. They allowed one to look without appearing to need to look, a distinction that mattered deeply to those who could not yet shake the idea that spectacles were an admission of frailty. Part 7. The early 19th century. The age of odd contraptions. The turn of the century brought with it a burst of experimental eyewear, much of it falling into the category of technically functional, but also slightly ridiculous. Monocles made their first confident strides, finding a home in the right eye sockets of European aristocrats and the occasional military officer. Their appeal was partly in the precision. A monocle could be custom ground to one eye's needs, and partly in the drama. To fit a monocle correctly required the eye muscles to hold it in place, giving the wearer an expression of constant, mild surprise. Pince-nez spectacles also became popular. Spring-loaded lenses that clamped directly to the bridge of the nose. These removed the need for arms entirely, which was convenient for those who found temple pieces uncomfortable, or whose hairstyles or headgear made over-ear glasses awkward. Theodore Roosevelt would later make pince-nez part of his personal brand, though he also famously carried a sturdy spectacles case in his breast pocket, one that once played a role in slowing a would-be assassin's bullet. for women, particularly in the drawing rooms and opera houses of Europe, lorgnettes were the height of refinement. These were folding spectacles on a handle, perfect for discreetly examining the embroidery on a rival's gown, or reading the libretto during a particularly long aria. The fact that they could be snapped shut and tucked away in a reticule meant no one had to know you needed them until you wanted them to. This was a period when eyewear was as much about how it looked as what it did. Every piece was a balance between visibility and invisibility, the need to see clearly without letting anyone know you needed help seeing clearly. Part 8. Mid to late 19th century. Everyday spectacles arrive. By the middle of the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution had begun to transform spectacle production. Lenses could be ground more consistently, frames stamped or pressed into shape, and prices dropped accordingly. For the first time, glasses were truly affordable to a large portion of the population. In towns and cities, opticians' shops began to appear with neat rows of frames in their windows, a public invitation to admit, at last, that perhaps the print was getting smaller. It was during this time that the simple wire rim frame became a staple. Gold-filled or steel, light and functional. These frames were the everyman's choice, equally at home on a school teacher's nose, or perched halfway down the face of a bank clerk checking ledgers. The look said nothing more than, "I can see the numbers now, thank you." And yet, style was creeping in. Spectacles became small works of art in themselves. Polished wood, engraved silver, even mother of pearl. They were the respectable cousin of the snuff box, a small portable item that could be shown off just enough to imply refinement. Even so, most wearers still removed their glasses for portraits, photographs, or social events. The idea of being permanently the one in glasses had not yet lost all of its sting. Part 9. The early 20th century. The democratization of sight. The early 1900s brought with it a subtle but irreversible shift. Wearing glasses was no longer a rarity, but something you could see on a tram, in an office, or even on the playing field. This was partly due to mass manufacturing. Factories could produce lenses in large batches, and frames, stamped from metal sheets, meant that what had once been artisanal could now be ordered by the thousand. But it was also because the notion of personal health and hygiene had expanded to include eyesight. Schools began checking on children's vision. Companies advertised the benefits of having your eyes seen to, and opticians became fixtures on the high street. It helped that styles were multiplying. You could choose the thin, almost invisible rimless spectacles favored by accountants and government clerks. Sturdy tortoise-shell frames for those who wanted to project solidity, or the instantly recognizable pince-nez, still hanging on as a kind of no-nonsense choice for military officers, civil servants, and Theodore Roosevelt impersonators. Meanwhile, the monocle entered its last years of true fashion relevance. Still beloved by certain generals, diplomats, and the occasional eccentric gentleman in a London club, but beginning to look just a touch like an affectation. Eyewear was also beginning to intersect with technology in new ways. Pilots in the First World War wore goggles to protect against wind and debris, and motorists adopted similar styles for open-top driving. While not spectacles in the traditional sense, these goggles paved the way for the acceptance of more specialized eyewear. One could wear something over the eyes without it being purely about vision correction. And on sunny days, in certain seaside towns, a few adventurous souls were beginning to sport tinted lenses. Not yet the sunglasses of Hollywood glamour, but the faint hint of what was to come. Part 10. Mid-20th century. Function meets glamour. By the 1930s and 40s, glasses were firmly part of everyday life, and sunglasses had stepped forward into the spotlight, quite literally. The Hollywood studio system discovered that dark lenses could shield actors' eyes from the blinding glare of arc lights on set, and audiences discovered that sunglasses made the wearer look somehow both mysterious and important. Cheap celluloid frames meant they could be mass-produced, and companies like Foster Grant capitalized on the appeal by selling them at beach resorts to anyone who fancied themselves a little bit famous. The Second World War added another twist. Military-issued sunglasses for pilots, including the now iconic aviator style developed by Ray-Ban. These were practical, designed to cut high-altitude glare, but they also carried the aura of wartime heroics. When soldiers brought them home, the style spread quickly among civilians who could imagine themselves as brave flyers every time they glanced in a shop window. In the world of corrective eyewear, the mid-century was a golden age for design variety. Thick, black, brow-line frames became a signature of the 1950s, worn by everyone from Malcolm X to Midwestern insurance agents. Cat-eye frames swept through women's fashion, adding an element of theater to something once regarded as purely utilitarian. And yet, for all the flair. The practical wire rim never disappeared. It continued quietly on, worn by millions who wanted to see without being seen. This was the moment when glasses truly stopped being a reluctant admission and became, for some, a deliberate part of their public identity. Part 11, in which spectacles become part of the persona. It is one thing to wear spectacles because one needs them, and quite another to wear them because they are part of who you are now. The latter is a curious transformation that seems to happen gradually. You start out thinking, I just need these to read the bus timetable, and end up with photographs, oil portraits, and perhaps even postage stamps of you wearing them. Take Mahatma Gandhi. Without his round spectacles, he would still have been a major figure in world history. But those thin wire frames made him instantly recognizable, even in silhouette. It said he would give away spare pairs to people who needed them, which was generous, but also the kind of thing you can only do if you own several identical pairs and are entirely confident that no one will mistake you for someone else without them. Imagine the awkwardness if he'd had to borrow a pair of oversized cat-eye frames from a passing supporter. History would remember him very differently. John Lennon was another case of the glasses becoming the man. He didn't start out famous for wearing them. In fact, he sometimes avoided them in public during early Beatlemania, favoring contact lenses. But by the late 1960s, he'd embraced the small, round Windsor frames so fully that to draw a cartoon Lennon, all you needed were 2 circles and some hair. Remove the glasses, and he could almost be anyone. With them, he could only be John Lennon, even if he was just buying milk. Then there are the politicians. Theodore Roosevelt's pince-nez were as much a part of his image as his moustache, and quite possibly more practical. Harry S. Truman had his thick, horn-rimmed spectacles, which gave him the air of a man who knew exactly how much you owed in taxes. And let us not forget the monocled gentlemen of Europe, generals, diplomats, and industrialists who had mastered the art of looking down their nose through a single lens, which is a feat of both facial control and social signaling. Glasses on celebrities often lead to one of two outcomes. One, the glasses become so famous that removing them causes mild public panic. Who is this? And what have they done with our beloved leader or musician? 2. The glasses are worn so sparingly that when they are spotted, perhaps in a candid photo, it makes the news. There was a time when catching a photograph of a royal wearing reading glasses was considered a notable, humanizing moment, proof that they, too, occasionally squinted at a menu. It is, in a way, a strange kind of immortality to have your eyewear live on in posters, biographies, and novelty mugs long after you are gone. One might say it is the most enduring form of product placement. The glasses never signed a contract, but they are in every shot. Part 12, in which we pretend the sun is our greatest foe. Sunglasses, like many things in life, began not as a fashion statement, but as a practical solution to a problem. That problem was, the sun is quite bright. For most of human history, people dealt with this by squinting, a theme you may have noticed recurring in this history, or by putting a hand up to block the glare, which is effective but inconvenient if you need that hand for carrying a jug of water, holding a spear, or turning the page of a book. The earliest recorded sunglasses, if we can call them that, appear in China during the 12th century. As I mentioned earlier, they were flat panes of smoky quartz set into frames and worn by judges. The stated purpose was to conceal the judge's eyes, so no one could guess their thoughts during trials. This was perhaps meant to convey impartiality, although it also made the judges look like they'd just stepped out of a particularly solemn beach holiday. They didn't block much sunlight, but they did add a certain mystique, useful if you were about to sentence someone and didn't want them to see you rolling your eyes. In Europe, the story is a bit muddier. By the 18th century, some opticians, as mentioned earlier, were experimenting with green or blue tinted lenses. They thought it might soothe the eyes. Whether this was genuinely effective or simply made the world look like it had been painted by a melancholic artist is debatable. Venetian gondoliers adopted green-tinted spectacles known as Goldoni glasses, which allowed them to punt about under the bright lagoon sun without developing a permanent squint, although it also meant that half the city was being navigated by men looking at everything through a green haze, which must have made traffic interesting. The modern mass-produced sunglasses we know today really took off in the 20th century, thanks to an American entrepreneur named Sam Foster. In 1929, he began selling inexpensive sunglasses on the beaches of Atlantic City. They were an instant hit, partly because they actually reduced glare, and partly because nothing says, "I am having a good time," quite like wearing dark glasses while sitting very still in the sand. Today, sunglasses come in every conceivable style, from wraparound mirrored lenses that make you look like a futuristic cyclist, to tiny round frames that suggest you might start quoting poetry at any moment. And while they still block the sun, their more enduring role is in hiding the eyes entirely from paparazzi, from fans, and from anyone who might notice you've just accidentally fallen asleep on a park bench. In the end, sunglasses are a marvelous example of human ingenuity, an object designed to protect us from nature, which we now use primarily to protect us from one another. Part 13, in which we count ourselves lucky to see at all. It is easy in our modern world to forget just how fortunate we are to be able to see clearly with the help of a small contraption balanced on our noses. We treat glasses almost as an afterthought, an object to be misplaced, sat on, or left in the glove compartment, without considering that for most of human history, if you couldn't see something, you simply didn't. The thing remained a distant blur, and you carried on your day, either pretending it wasn't important, or confidently misidentifying it. Imagine the missed opportunities. A merchant might wave at what he thought was a regular customer, only to discover at much closer range that it was a stack of barrels. A poet might wax lyrical about the graceful antelope on the hillside, blissfully unaware it was, in fact, a brown goat eating someone's washing. And in battle, which was unfortunately a common pastime in earlier centuries, there must have been countless occasions when soldiers charged heroically toward what they assumed was the enemy, only to find it was a tree. Even reading, that most contemplative of pursuits, was once limited by the naked eye's willingness to cooperate. Without glasses, letters danced, blurred, and occasionally merged into entirely new words. You could try holding the page further away, but this eventually reaches a point where you are no longer reading so much as squinting at a piece of paper you've nailed to the opposite wall. Now, of course, all that has changed. You can walk into an optician's shop, have your eyesight measured with a machine that looks like it might also launch satellites, and walk out with a pair of lenses so precisely tailored that you can tell instantly whether the person waving at you is a friend, a stranger, or a hat stand. The entire world sharpens, and all for less than the price of a second-hand bicycle. We might complain about the small inconveniences, the smudge that appears on your glasses 5 minutes after you clean them, the way they fog up when you open the oven, the eternal mystery of where they've gone when they are in fact on your face. But these are minor irritations compared to living in a gentle blur. To see clearly is, in its own quietly miraculous way, one of the great luxuries of our time. It's just that, like most luxuries, we only notice it when it's gone. Part 14, in which the present comes into focus. The 21st century has given us more choices for seeing clearly than at any other point in history. Glasses themselves have become lighter, stronger, and in some cases so thin they can be mistaken for nothing at all, which is ironic, considering how much effort some people spend choosing frames that make the loudest possible statement about their personality. There are glasses for reading, for driving, for staring at screens, for blocking blue light, and for making you look just enough like a film director to order coffee with creative authority. And then there are contact lenses, the quiet alternative for those who prefer not to balance anything on their nose. First introduced in their modern form in the mid-20th century, they've evolved into tiny, transparent marvels that sit directly on the eye. They are not without their challenges. For one thing, there is the daily ritual of putting them in, which involves holding your eyelid open with one hand, while the other approaches your eyeball with a small disc of plastic. This is an act so counterintuitive that it must be learned slowly, with many false starts, sudden flinches, and occasional muttered apologies to oneself. For those who master them, contact lenses offer the freedom to play sports, wear non-prescription sunglasses, or stand in the rain without worrying about droplets refracting into a world of chaos. They also make it possible for people to change their eye color, although this is mainly done in photographs and costume dramas, rather than in day-to-day life. The novelty of having violet eyes tends to wear off once you realize it does not, in fact, make you royalty. Now, of course, we also have corrective surgery, laser treatments that reshape the cornea with such precision that you can walk into a clinic as a person who cannot read the sign on the door and walk out able to spot a pigeon from across the street. Even so, glasses have endured. They remain a practical, affordable, and, for many, comforting presence. They can be taken off when you wish to avoid recognizing people, or to signal that you are off duty for the day. And so, our incredibly dull journey comes to a close. From ancient magnifying stones to smoky quartz, from wire frames to mirrored aviators, humanity has been steadily improving the simple act of seeing. We may take it for granted now, as we slip on our glasses in the morning, or tuck our contact lenses into place. But behind every clear view lies centuries of invention, adaptation, and the occasional celebrity who made a pair of spectacles look far more interesting than they had any right to be. In the end, eyewear is not just about correcting vision. It's about the small, quiet joy of looking at the world and thinking, ah yes, there